All right, we're live. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Doug.
Happy Valentine's Day, or as a single friend of mine once referred to it, Happy Singles Awareness Day.
Love it. That is so good. Singles Awareness Day. Are you single these days, Doug?
Yeah, I've been divorced for 10 years now.
Okay. Um, Happy Singles Awareness Day to you.
Thank you.
Um, all right. So I've had the pleasure of getting to know you at a couple of different events, and you come into the office every once in a while. And do you have do you come in on Tuesdays all the time, or just
Uh, Most Tuesday afternoons and most Wednesday afternoons.
okay? So that's excellent. But for those people in our community who don't know much about you, can you tell us who you are and uh, you know life a little before Parkinson's? What
Sure.
makes you tick?
Well, I'm Doug Reid. I'm in Lafayette, Colorado, only about 15 minutes away from the Davis Cine Foundation offices. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2010 when I was 36. I'll be 50 in August. Um, and I'd been experiencing a tremor in my left hand. Uh, they call it a pill rolling tremor, where if you imagine um, I had a capsule in my between my thumb and forefinger and was moving it back and forth. And my wife at the time was a physician. She told me I should get it checked out. And this was probably about 2 years prior to my diagnosis. And I'd had the tremor off and on for, I don't know, maybe 2, 3 years before that.
Mm.
And my primary care doc didn't know what was going on, wrote me a prescription for a beta blocker, thinking that might help. I don't even think I ever got that prescription filled. The tremor continued to get worse, and my wife suggested I go back to the primary care doc. She referred me to a neurologist, and after about a 15-minute physical exam, the neurologist said, "You have classic young onset Parkinson symptoms," and I got a movement disorder specialist appointment at a clinic down in Denver. And same thing, about 15 minutes with him, and he confirmed the diagnosis.
Wow.
So that was
Any family history of?
my maternal grandmother had Parkinson's, but it didn't set in until her 60s, late 60s, I think. And I've been genetically tested. I don't have any of the known markers for Parkinson's. I did grow up in Delaware, very agricultural area. We had well water, and I can even remember running through a field as it was being crop dusted, which wasn't the smartest thing to do.
Right.
But I was a young, dumb kid and out playing in the fields.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So that's my theory on how I got Parkinson's is maybe some genetic predisposition, a marker that hasn't been identified yet. Um, but I, about 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, I had DBS surgeries. I watched a Davis Finney webinar on DBS, and it was led by Dr. Kara Beasley, a neurosurgeon in the greater Boulder, Lafayette, Louisville area. And I thought, wow, I could have this excellent, skilled, fantastic neurosurgeon providing me with DBS in my own backyard. The hospital where I had the surgeries was less than a 10-15 minute drive away from my house. And so it was super convenient. And I jokingly, many of you who are on watching this may have heard me say it before, but I jokingly consider myself the poster child for positive outcomes of DBS.
Mm.
I still have some non-motor symptoms, and just within the past 2 months, I've noticed my tremor coming back, and my controller for my DBS has a safety threshold where my movement disorder specialist can adjust that threshold or ceiling, I guess I should call it. And I've been trying to get an appointment so I can get it, so I can tick it up, and I've reached the ceiling, if you will.
Mm. Okay.
So,
So 36, really, or 38, I guess, when you got the official.
No, I was 36.
Okay. That's young, right? I mean, you probably didn't have a whole lot of people in your world that were having the similar experience. So, what was that? What was the initial feeling? You know, you're driving home from that
I can
diagnosis.
remember thinking, all right, I got to learn about this disease and I want to try and stay as positive as possible, keeping a good mental attitude about it. Unfortunately, I think I was already depressed. In hindsight, I think it was Parkinson's related depression that had set in probably a year or two before diagnosis. And I didn't start medication right away, but um, I was involved in a couple different clinical trials, and I guess over time my depression got worse. I started taking a dopamine agonist. I think that was one of the first medications that I took, and I suffered from an impulse control disorder that I was embarrassed about. I didn't tell anyone about. When I'd go to see my neurosurgeon, they'd ask me if I was experiencing any unusual urges, and I lied and said I wasn't and was embarrassed to talk about it. One of the things that I did while I was on the dopamine agonist, these are my collection of Simpsons minifigures.
Oh,
Um, you could buy them at Toys R Us. I'm a big Simpsons fan, and the minifigures, you didn't know what you were buying, and so I would go to
it
Toys
was
R
like a
Us.
mystery in a box. You mean like it was?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. And so I was obsessed with the Simpsons minifigures, wanting to get the entire collection, and spent a fair amount of money on those silly toys. And then Lego stopped manufacturing the Simpsons minifigures, and I didn't have the complete set yet. So, being obsessed and not being able to control things, I went on eBay and bought the entire set. So uh, I keep that in my office as a reminder of, all right, take it easy. I'm off the dopamine agonist. I've been off of it for probably 6 or 7 years now, but
Did that
um,
those urges go away immediately?
not immediately, but it was fairly quickly. I thought, whoa, I don't have to be doing these things anymore.
That's crazy.
But I was in a horrible depression, and I got DBS. I was doing a lot better, but I was still depressed. And then COVID hit, and I was isolating, and I was very depressed and drinking heavily. And then finally, about a year and a half ago, I saw my primary care doc and said I need to go on an antidepressant. And I'd taken one in the past that just made me not care.
Yeah.
And I was prescribed a different drug, and it was like a light went on. And
Oh,
I got back in the gym. I lost 45 pounds.
holy moly.
Well, I put on some back, but still, I lost 40 pounds, I guess I should say. And I am a gym rat these days. I go to the gym for 2, 3 hours a day sometimes. And most days I go to the gym. I try and get in some exercise in every day. And it was funny. I was at the gym sometime last week, and I passed a personal trainer in the hallway who I'm friendly with, and she just casually said to me, "How are you doing?" And I just randomly said, "I can't complain." And she said, "Well, I can, but I'm not gonna." And, and I thought to myself, I have Parkinson's. She doesn't, and she
Right.
has to complain about. I've always got things I can complain about, but
Yeah.
I choose not to.
Yeah. Wow. So that was so you're it sounds like you just got really hit with those the non-motor symptoms kind of took you out more than your motor symptoms initially, and just
Yeah.
something you need to always kind of be paying attention to.
Hmm.
So we have a lot of people that they might ask, well, is it depression or is it Parkinson's? And it's kind of like it doesn't really matter because you can treat them. Doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Which one it is. But what would you offer to them about people that are maybe hesitant to think about depression meds or anxiety meds or anything like that? Like, what was your experience with that?
Monitor your own happiness. And if you're not happy, do something about it. If you're not happy most of the time, do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, don't be embarrassed. Don't be shy. Uh, take medication. I remember talking with someone years ago when I first went on an antidepressant, and she said to me, if you had the flu, you'd want medicine. Go
Yeah.
ahead and take medicine to
Yeah.
help you feel better.
Yeah. Did your movement disorder specialist talk to you about these non-motor symptoms very often, or was this something you were always bringing up yourself?
Um, I don't think I see a different movement disorder specialist now, and he is very good about checking my attitude, my affect. My first movement disorder specialist, I'm not sure. I don't recall discussing depression that much, although he was the one who initially prescribed the antidepressant that didn't work. Made me not care about things really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't, it was so long ago, and I think I was on that antidepressant for 3 or 4 years or so. And
The one that you just didn't care?
yeah,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
and
So you were just not really doing much.
yeah, and I worked from home, and so I was very isolated. And um, I was recently interviewed by someone from Parkinson's Association of the Rockies. They're in their upcoming newsletter. They're spotlighting young onset people with Parkinson's. And I was asked, what advice would I give to people who are newly diagnosed? And I thought about it. Get involved. Don't be afraid to go to support groups. They're good. And that was one thing that I didn't do until I got on this other antidepressant. I'd never been to a support group. I'd never actually talked to somebody who had Parkinson's for probably 10 years after I was diagnosed.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. And it's not that I was in denial. I just made excuses and
Mhm.
thought support groups are going to be depressing. And the young onset support group that meets regularly in Colorado, they meet about an hour away from my house, and they meet on Friday afternoons at 6 o'clock. And for me to battle traffic, I was making excuses. But
Mhm.
I go to those meetings monthly, almost all the time. Um, I I lead a DBS support group, and I'm trying to get Parkinson's Association of the Rockies to let me lead a young onset group via Zoom. So people who can't make the drive can still participate.
Yeah, well, we're gonna do one of those too, Doug.
Oh, good.
So Kim says, my shakes are bad enough that I have a hard time typing on my phone. Also, my balance is terrible and I've lost 20 pounds because of depression. The meds make me sick. I'm not sure if she's talking about the Parkinson's meds or the depression meds. And then she says, how do you feel about that deep brain shock thing? I think she's probably talking about deep brain stimulation. The doctor said something about it. I watched it on YouTube and it scared the crap out of me. So a couple things there, but I'd love to talk about the whole sort of your entire process around DBS. Is this something that you brought up to your doctor? Did your doctor say, hey, you've got, symptoms that are perfectly aligned for DBS? How did that whole thing go? And then, sort of that process getting ready for it.
The first movement disorder specialist that I saw, I had the conversation with him probably about 5 or 6 years after I was diagnosed. And he wasn't very aggressive in regard to surgery. He looked at it like, as long as the medications are still working for you, you're good to go. And I was taking so much carbidopa levodopa. It's been so long since I've taken it. I've forgotten if I was taking 3 Rytary every 4 hours or 4 Rytary every 4 hours, but I took a lot of it and I was very dyskinetic.
Mm.
And every time I'd go see the neurologist, my symptoms wouldn't be bad. I had to drive close to 45 minutes to an hour to his office. And so I'd make sure that I was on so I could do the drive. And I'd get to the office and my symptoms wouldn't be that bad. And it wasn't until I watched the Davis Finney webinar that I thought I should have done this a couple of years prior. And I thought, I'm finished going to that movement disorder specialist. I'm going to see if I can see a neurologist. That was a problem at the time. The closest movement disorder specialist was probably about 45 minutes, a 45-minute drive away. And Dr. Beasley, my neurosurgeon, she recommended just a general neurologist in my neighborhood, in my community, I guess you could call it. And so after watching the webinar, I think I called Dr. Beasley's office that same afternoon and scheduled an initial consult. And she referred me to the general neurologist. And it was Dr. Beasley, the neurosurgeon, who did my exams and told me I was an ideal candidate. And I remember her saying, DBS surgeries are my favorite thing to do because they so often, regularly help and benefit the patient.
Mm-hmm.
I am a DBS advocate. I know the surgeries can be scary. They have ways to do them now where you can have all the procedures done in one surgery and you can be asleep for it. So if you're very scared, I would recommend biting the bullet, I guess, if you will, and go for the asleep surgeries or surgery.
And what device did you have implanted?
I have the Boston Scientific rechargeable, and I know some neurosurgeons and movement disorder specialists recommend that you charge weekly. I just charge it once a month. It takes 2 to 3 hours, but I'll sit in front of the TV. I've driven up to the mountains charging it. It's pretty easy. It's not painful. If I have the charger directly on my skin, it gets a little itchy and warm, but I usually will wear 2 shirts like I am now, and I'll put the charger in between the 2 shirts. So it's pretty easy, pretty simple.
Yeah. Great. So, and your online support group for DBS is it an online support group for DBS or is it in person? Okay. So is it open? Like people can join it if they want, or?
Yeah. Okay. If anyone is interested in joining, email info. Is it info@dpf.org or blog? DPF.
Oh, blog at dpf.org. Yeah.
And I'll get your email address and I can get you included.
Great. Let's see. Christy says, "Hi, Doug. My shopping sprees on dopamine agonists involve buying all vintage squirrel ashtrays off of Etsy. Funny, not funny. Good reminder." And a picture says 1,000 words.
I know who that person is. She's in the young onset group with me, and she regularly attends the DBS meetings as well.
She says, "Good reminder not to be ashamed to talk to your movement disorder specialist about the medications and changes, side effects experienced." Yes. Kim says, "I had never heard of it before, but I believe I want to shave my head plus the surgeries done when you're awake, and that scares me." Okay. Yeah. So there is possible to have a sleep DBS. It's happening more now than it was. I was just actually talking to a neurosurgeon and a doc from that implant a lot of Medtronic devices yesterday. And the surgeon said that she's almost doing 50-50 at this point, which is different from even a couple years ago. So definitely options. And also, just the ability to have such accuracy, really interesting.
And I think for some women that undergo DBS, they only shave parts of your head so you can retain most of your hair. I had 3 separate surgical procedures conducted, each a month apart. and they shaved my head completely bald for each one.
Mhm.
Fortunately, I didn't look too goofy.
So you did bilateral? You did them all different times, or?
They did either the left or the right brain first, I can't remember, and then waited a month, did the other side of the brain, and then waited a month and put in the generator. And then I think it was just a week after they implanted the generator that they activated it.
Mhm.
And I remember going into the neurosurgeon's office and they want you off medication. So I hadn't taken my meds for 12 hours or so and was very tremory when I went into the office, and they activated the system. And I remember just feeling this rush of energy from my head moving down to my fingertips and to my toes.
Wow.
And it was almost like an instantaneous rush. And then I was calm and not tremoring. And I remember thinking, wow, I haven't felt this good in years.
Oh, man.
And I remember walking out of the neurosurgeon's office and just, it was a sunny day and it
You're
was
like,
beautiful.
"Zippity-doo-dah."
Yeah, I'm getting emotional now just thinking about it, but
Wow.
it was,
Like, what was the programming process? Was that did they pretty much get it right?
um, the neurosurgeon's PA was doing the programming, and she had help from the Boston Scientific rep, and they got the programming pretty darn good right off the bat. But I think they set the ceiling limit on the controller very low, and I would they gave me some flexibility where I could control it, and it was almost like the energy, the electricity from the generator was like medicine for me.
Mm.
If I put the controller up too high, I would get dyskinetic, and so I could crank it down a little bit lower. But I guess back to your question, the first programming session went great, but they had me come into the office 2 weeks later, and I had already ticked it up to the ceiling limit, and so
Mm.
they moved it up a little higher. I went back to the office 2 weeks later. I was at the ceiling. They brought it up even higher, and it went that way, I think, probably for a couple of months, where I was initially going in every 2 weeks, but then I would start to go in monthly. And then the PA quit, who was doing the programming, and I was getting the programming done primarily by the Boston Scientific sales rep, and he was good, but I thought I should really have a physician doing the programming. And it was at that point that I decided, all right, enough with the general neurologist. I'm going to go back seeing a movement disorder specialist. And I was fortunate enough to get an appointment, and I still see a movement disorder specialist who does my programming. And for the past year and a half or so, I've gone in and had minor problems that they would try and tweak the pulse width or pulse frequency, and sometimes it would help, sometimes it wouldn't. But for the most part, I was stable. My tremors were well controlled, and I don't think I mentioned before, but since I've had DBS, I weaned myself off of carbidopa levodopa completely, and I only take 2 selegiline tablets a day. That's the only Parkinson's medication I take. So my dyskinesias have gone away as well.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So did they say that it was pretty typical to have you sort of reach that ceiling early on, just kind of over and over to get you to a place that
I think I'm not certain. I think everyone's a little different, but I would I think from what I hear from other people who've had DBS through the support group meetings that I co-lead, um, I think the programming typically takes a little while, a handful of appointments and sessions to
Mhm.
get it really dialed in. And unfortunately, for some people, it just doesn't
Yeah.
work as well as it does for me. So
Yeah.
I'm fortunate. I'm grateful.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit. I assume you were working when you
Yes.
were diagnosed, and that's sort of it's like peak time, right? You're 36 years old, your
That's at
family
the
and
top
all
of my
these
game.
things. So what happened with work? What were you doing, and how did you let your employer know if you did?
Well, I worked from home. I worked for a nonprofit organization that reviewed and analyzed medical technologies for safety, cost effectiveness, and overall effectiveness. Does the technology work? And I worked in sales for the organization. So I sold information to hospitals to basically help them become better hospitals. And working from home, my boss at the time I was diagnosed lived in New York. And so I didn't see people from the office very regularly. And we would have an annual sales meeting at the office. And I think for the first couple of years, I tried to hide things, but I worked with people who worked in the medical field essentially, and there were some nurses and physicians in the main office. And I can remember at one meeting, one of the nurses asked me what was going on. She saw my hands shaking, and I said, "Well, I have Parkinson's." And I wasn't trying to keep it a secret necessarily, but people respected my privacy, I guess. The word really didn't get out. Then my boss actually moved to Colorado, and his daughter was at the university and he wanted to be closer to her. I had a good relationship with him, and he took me out to lunch, and I told him, and he said, "Yeah, I'd seen you shaking. I wasn't sure, but I thought you might have Parkinson's." And I continued to work for probably 8 to 10 years after that. Um, I'm trying to think what I want to say, but it eventually became exhausting. I did a lot of overnight business travel, and my tremors got to the point where typing was extremely difficult for me. I was double touching keys, and even working a mouse was difficult. Um, and shortly before COVID hit, or I guess it was shortly after COVID hit, I decided I'm done. It was too stressful. And the organization had been very relaxed, and I was able, working from home for most of the time, I was able to take naps during the day. But then the organization started changing, and it was becoming a lot more rigid and strict. Zoom was becoming a thing at that time. And I can remember being on a a video, or not a video conference, just a teleconference that didn't have video. And I was presenting one of the services that the company had developed. I was presenting it to some hospital system, and I was extremely dyskinetic. And for me, when I would talk, I would become even more dyskinetic. And I remember thinking, if people can see me like this, not in person, it's not as bad, but virtually, I remember thinking, if people are watching me through their computer and I'm wiggling and shaking, it's going to be distracting. And just being online, you can ignore things, you can let your mind drift more than you can if you're in person.
True.
And so it was kind of a tough decision. I really loved the job. I loved travel. I loved meeting new people and seeing new places. And it was a sad day when I decided to throw in the towel.
Hmm.
Um,
Did
but I've
you?
been out of work now for 3 years, and overall, I'm doing a lot better. My stress level is lower. I'm able to get in the gym and exercise. The YMCA that I belong to has pedaling for Parkinson's classes 3 days a week, and they're 11 to noon. So when I was working, it wasn't that easy to get over there and pedal. And
Right.
I was so depressed back then, I wasn't exercising.
Yeah. Was exercise a part of your life prior to Parkinson's or anything?
Uh, growing up, I was a competitive swimmer all through elementary school and then through high school and college as well. Um, After college, I stopped swimming because it's kind of a mentally tough sport, not being able to talk to people and just staring at a line on the bottom of the pool going back and forth. But I would run regularly. I'd lift weights. I was in pretty good shape at the time that I was diagnosed. But with depression and tremors, I can remember running on a treadmill at the gym and my hand was just knocking in the treadmill because it wasn't shaking, it wasn't pumping. And I just thought, I'm done. And I stopped exercising. And wasn't the smartest thing for me. I knew that exercising was the best thing for people with Parkinson's, and I just let the depression take over.
Yeah. Yeah. And then once you started exercise, well, did you start exercising once you changed your meds?
Yeah, once I went on the antidepressant that I'm on now, I
Yeah.
just the light went on and I thought, what am I doing with my life? I need to start going to support groups. I need to reach out to the Parkinson's community and get involved and get active.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that you know, that depression piece, anxiety piece is, you know, a lot of people will talk about it as this one symptom, but it impacts so many other things that impact your Parkinson's, right? If you're too depressed to get exercise, well, then you're gonna be hurting yourself, right? For
Yeah.
Parkinson's. So I just want people to advocate for themselves and get the right meds, get the right combination of something. And if it doesn't work, try again. There are options. Um, and you know, it's no different than people without Parkinson's who have depression or anxiety. They often go through many different types of drugs to find the one that works.
Mhm.
And it can be the difference between just kind of existing and thriving. So
Yeah, that's a
don't
good
be
way to
afraid
describe it.
to go and ask for it. In addition to all the other things you can do, right? But it's, you know, you can exercise is a big thing for feeling better. But if you're too depressed to exercise, then you gotta back up and go to the top of the waterfall, right? You can't just be trying to solve all the things that are at the bottom. You got to go to the top of the waterfall and pick some
Yeah,
of those big items out.
and exercise is so beneficial. I mean, I feel better, so my mind is better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's kind of hard to describe, but when I was not exercising, I was overweight and not confident about my body, being
Mm-hmm.
single and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
being kind of shy and not wanting to get out there. And now that I'm fit once again, I'm more confident, and that has helped to ease some of the depression as well.
Yeah. Plus, you know, now you're giving back so much to the community.
Mhm.
You know, feeling that, you know, not letting that inertia just stop you. You're getting out there. You're running a support group. You're co-leading support groups. You're an ambassador. I know part of, you know, being interested in the Davis Finney Foundation was you saw the webinar and it's been helpful. And so now you're an ambassador, you're on our Living with Parkinson's panel. What are some of the things that you do as an ambassador for the Parkinson's community in general?
Well, I've had a number of people reach out wanting to know about DBS, wanting to know about young onset. And I spoke with one gentleman a handful of months ago who had just been diagnosed, and he was very nervous, very concerned. He felt like he'd been given a death sentence. And just talking to him, and we weren't even face to face, so we were talking over the phone. And I told him about my story and with DBS and how I'm doing a lot better now. And I I really set his fears at ease, I think. And I mean, we had an emotional conversation. I think we were both crying at
Mm,
various points in the call. And I remember him saying, "Thank you so much. I was so afraid and so scared," and made me feel good that I'd helped somebody.
Yeah. Kim said the same. Thank you so much. I don't feel so alone now. And maybe the embarrassment will get better. Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, I think that we constantly get, emails from people saying, your ambassadors are amazing. Thank you. I don't feel so alone. They get me. And it is that thing of just, oh, these people get me. And they might not have the same, right? No person with Parkinson's, the same situation, but especially young onset, you understand the kids and the work and the family and all of the things that are going on, and you just want somebody to say it's going to be okay. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
And in regard to support groups, uh, meeting people who have Parkinson's, whether they're young onset or regular onset, whatever you want to call it, I can honestly say I've never met someone with Parkinson's who I thought was a jerk.
right? I'm like, I don't know if nice people get Parkinson's or they get Parkinson's and then they're nice or what happens, but
Yeah.
this is the best community of people I've ever
Mhm.
had the pleasure of knowing.
I was at a Pedaling for Parkinson's spin class just yesterday, and I think it was the largest class that I've ever been to. We had 2 gentlemen had their wives there, and I think we were probably close to 15 people in the class, and we were having a good time. We were laughing and joking, and at the end of the class, one of the other gentlemen said something about, I was thinking, it's almost" I forget exactly what he said. I was thinking, how did he phrase it? Having Pa having Parkinson's isn't a big deal if you can go to classes like this. And then he said, "Well," or no, he said, I'm blanking.
That's okay.
I'm having brain fog.
That's okay.
He was implying that having Parkinson's wasn't that bad if you can go to classes and enjoy things.
Yeah.
But then he pulled back and said, "Yeah, Parkinson's is kinda nasty," and he's
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be both, right?
yeah,
How to be able to appreciate that there are some opportunities. Probably have a lot of friends you might not have ever had, and that's pretty great. And it doesn't make up for the fact of how much Parkinson's sucks.
yeah,
Nobody wants it, right? But at least there's something um, beneficial in some way, shape, or form. And that's what I think. Like I not don't want to be Pollyanna about it. It's not good. I don't want it. I don't want anyone to have it. But it's
you
there.
gotta look for the silver lining somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta do something because the alternative isn't great either. Everybody, people, happy birthday. Oh, I'm so old. I'm like, well, the alternative. Do you want not to have a birthday? Like, I don't understand that at all. Like the other thing is to just not have it. So why
Yeah.
are we complaining about how old we are or aren't? Susan says, I have way too many health situations to exercise frequently. Face purple wide eyes. But she also says, I do show up to your YouTube live sessions for encouragement. Yeah. You know, sometimes it's just a little seed that someone says and you think, oh, I might try that. And who knows what'll
Yeah.
happen. Right.
Mhm. We can
You,
learn from each other.
yeah. You have, how many kids do you have?
I have 2. I
Two.
have a son who's 15 and a half.
Yeah. They're on the same, my daughter and your son are on the same swim team.
Yep.
So they were quite young when you were diagnosed.
Yeah, my son was almost 2 and my daughter wasn't even a year old yet.
So like how did those conversations go? I mean, obviously you didn't tell them like when they were that young, but what happened with that?
Yeah, I tried to hide it from them, and I can remember one time walking through a parking lot, and I guess my arms weren't swinging or something, and some stranger said to me, "Did you have a stroke?" And I said, "No, I have Parkinson's." And I think my kids, I don't know if they heard that, but if I think that might have been the start of their somewhat curiosity. I can remember another time when I was tucking my son into bed at night, and I had a dyskinesia. I had a jerking movement, and he said, "What was that?" And I just kind of brushed it off and didn't say anything. And they they've come to understand that I have Parkinson's, and when I went in for the deep brain stimulation surgeries, I remember my daughter saying, "I don't want you to do it." She was scared that something bad would happen, and I told her, "I think this is the right thing for me. It's gonna help me, and I'm gonna do it." And I think it wasn't until I had the surgeries that they learned more about Parkinson's. I've had conversations with them, but it's more or less, um, there'll be something that happens, and I'll say, "Oh, yeah, that's because I have Parkinson's," or I can remember sitting at a table and holding a cup of water and spilling it a little bit, and, that's part of Parkinson's. Being depressed, I just within the past 2 years or so, I explained to them that I was battling through depression and, that I took medication and I was doing better, but it was still an ongoing battle.
Mhm. And do they ever ask like, "Hey, like, am I gonna get Parkinson's?"
No, they never have asked that.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a relief when I got genetically tested and didn't have any of the genetic markers,
Yeah.
the known markers at least.
Yeah.
Um, and
It's so interesting. Kids are so different about it. Some of
yeah,
them just get they wanna know everything, and they're involved in everything, and they know every symptom and every possible symptom and everything, and some, just like, "No, this is just my dad. This is
yeah,
what he has."
I could remember being at one of my daughter's friends' birthday parties, and this was when my daughter was probably 4 or 5. I mean, she was really young, and I was dyskinetic, and one of her friends asked me, like, "What's going on? Why are you wiggling and shaking?" And my daughter s or I said, "Oh, I have a disease that makes me shake." And my daughter said, "That's okay, he's still awesome."
Oh, that's so good.
And
Yeah.
man, that broke my heart almost, but or didn't break my heart, it made me feel good.
Feels so good, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just one part. Audrey says, "I always think, man, I don't want it to be this. I don't want it to be that. I don't want it to be anything. It's silly though, because whatever it is, it's still always there doing what it does. And I'm still who I am as usual." Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't go away, and I know eventually I'm gonna be back on carbidopa levodopa, and, ugh, I'm trying to stay off of it for as long as I can, but I know it can help me, and at the time when the DBS stops being as effective, it'll be time to go back on the meds,
Hmm.
and previously, I wasn't good about having a set schedule. I mean, I was traveling through different time zones from time to time, so I'd wake up at different times, but even, um, even on a normal day when I was at home, I may not be on the same schedule that I was the day before. I wouldn't take my meds at the same time. I wasn't diligent about managing the disease. As I said before, I wasn't exercising.
Hmm.
And so I've learned through my mistakes that there are better ways to manage the disease and better outcomes through better management of the disease.
Hmm. What are some things that you do, like really practical things you do every single day that you know for sure are helping you live well?
Well, I think I have a routine where I do basically the same thing every morning. I wake up, I have my breakfast, I have a cup of coffee, and I'll sit down and I'll do some brain games. I do the Wordle, I do wordscapes, and I do Sudoku puzzles, and just to wake my brain up and start thinking. And then I usually go into the gym and we'll work out for a few hours. And then I come home and I'll either go into the Finney Foundation office and volunteer, or I'll sometimes I do more brain games. Sometimes I'll read a book, um, just to try and keep my mind in a good place. And I try not to sweat the small stuff. I try and stay positive and stay active, and maintaining my happiness, I think is a key for me. Um, yeah, I try not to sweat the small stuff. I try not to worry. I'm lucky that I haven't really experienced much anxiety. And I don't know if that's because I'm good at putting the blinders on and not future tripping and thinking about things down the road. I don't have a care partner, and the other day I was driving and thinking, "Man, what's it gonna be like when I can't drive anymore?" And I thought, "Ah, put it out of my
Yeah.
mind. I can drive now."
Not for now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and cross that bridge when I come to it.
Right. Absolutely. Who do you count on in your life for support?
My sister and I are very close. She was there for me when I had the DBS surgeries, took me in, and was there when I got out. Um, she's a nurse too, so um,
You
and
guys are
she
a medical family. Does she live here? Does she live near you?
well, she took a travel assignment, so she's outside of Boise
Oh,
currently, but she has a home in Erie, which is
okay. Yeah,
about
that's really nice.
20 minutes away from me or so.
Mhm.
Um, and my dad is here as well. Um, so a few nights each week, I'll go and hang out with him in the evening, and we'll watch movies and have dinner together. But that's all part of my routine.
Yeah, and just staying connected.
Yeah, and it's funny. Part of getting out of the depression was telling myself I need to try new things, but I have this routine, and
New things
so
within the routine, right?
yeah, and so it's almost upsetting the apple cart sometimes, but I'll think, I gotta do that. I gotta do that. This, for example, I was nervous to come on. I remember emailing you and you saying, I gotcha.
Yeah,
And I thought, okay, I can do this. I can do this.
absolutely. Yeah, no one would notice one iota of nervousness, so yeah, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Right?
Yeah. Make a
Nothing.
fool out of myself. Well, if you can't laugh at
That's
yourself, you
yeah,
shouldn't be laughing at others.
it's not possible. Um, Great. Well, is there anything, that I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you about?
Um, not, nothing that I can think of. Getting back to what I mentioned earlier, what I would recommend or advise to people who are recently diagnosed is stay active, get involved, and don't be afraid of the disease. It's not a death sentence. People don't die from Parkinson's these days.
Right? I'm gonna throw up I don't know why this isn't just like some sort of shortcut key on my thing, but so anybody listening, if you want to connect with an ambassador, Doug, for example, just go to this page and you can learn all about our ambassadors. And if you're feeling alone, if you're feeling like nobody quite gets it, reach out to an ambassador. They are, like I
Yeah.
always say, our most valuable asset at the organization, and somebody will be thrilled to talk to you and thrilled to talk about, what challenges you're going through right now. So do that. Um, I'm not scared of Parkinson's. Parkinson's is scared of me. Yes, I like that.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
great, Susan. That's great. Well, thank you, Doug. We're going to see you in a couple tomorrow, Thursday, for our panel. So for those of you who are not part of it and want to watch, come and see our Living with Parkinson's meetup. We're the third Thursday of every month, and we'll be there actually talking about, in honor of Singles Awareness Day today, we're going to be talking about love and relationships and care partners and all that fun stuff. So thanks, Doug, and thanks everybody else for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.